This is an episode I would have needed years ago. Today, we're talking about 5 ways to enjoy social events this summer without overeating, losing control, and feeling bad about it. Let's jump in. Welcome to the Live Unrestricted podcast, a show where you'll learn how to heal your relationship with food and your body so that you can focus your time and energy on more important things like your personal growth. I'm your host, Sabrina Magna, food freedom coach, and my mission is to help make your life happier and healthier without stress, overwhelm, or guilt about food. If you love the show, please do go out and share it. And if you're looking for support with your relationship with food, details about my programs are in the show notes. Thanks for spending time with me today. Now let's jump in. This is it. We are full force into summer 2024. And this is the time where you've got the weddings, the summer barbecues, the pool parties, the birthdays, and this along with the holidays, right around Christmas and New Year's. The summer can be one of the toughest times when it comes to food, especially if you're someone who struggles with overeating or dieting or having trust and control around food. So today I really want to talk about 5 ways that you can implement so that you can go to these social events and not feel anxious about it beforehand, right? Anxious that there's not going to be any food that you can eat. And what if you start eating and then you can't stop eating? And what if you overeat? And what if you fall off the wagon, right? Like that, those are all thoughts that can come up in your mind, especially if you struggle with your relationship with food. And these are all things that I used to struggle with really deeply. And this topic came up for me because I have a super busy summer coming up. I've got 3 weddings, 2 bachelorette parties. I have 3 trips. I mean, there's a lot going on. And on top of that, there's family get-togethers. And for some reason, all of my friends have their birthdays during the summer. So this is a really busy time. And what's really wonderful now, because of all the work I've done into my healing, is that none of that triggers any kind of anxiety, right? Like the thought about food doesn't even cross my mind. But this did not used to be the case. And I have some friends, and I, of course, have my clients inside Food Freedom Academy who can feel some stress going into these social events. And one of my favorite things is helping people and guiding them through like really simple things that you can implement that are going to make these things that are meant to be fun and relaxing, right? Like spending time with your loved ones is supposed to be something that you look forward to. So I'm going to get into it and stick around until the end because I actually have an extra bonus tip. So number 6, I left it out in the title, but I've got a bonus tip for you at the end as well. So let's just get into it right away. And first, I think I want to talk about some of the common mistakes that I see people making. And these are mistakes that I used to make. So I completely understand where you're coming from. That can make it more likely that you actually do lose control and overeat. And some of those things are skipping meals, right? Like saving up your calories for the day. So if you know that you're going to a barbecue later and there's going to be chips and hot dogs and burgers and all of these foods that you maybe don't allow yourself, quote unquote, allow yourself to eat, then you might think, well, what I'm going to do is I'm definitely going to be eating more calories later today, so I'm going to save up my calories now. So maybe that means I'm not going to eat breakfast, or I'm going to eat a smaller breakfast, or I'm not going to eat carbs, or I'm going to eat quote unquote clean. And all that does is it actually sets you up for overeating later. Because think of it this way. Imagine that you really wanted to get a good night's sleep tomorrow. And so you decided, you know what I'm going to do? I'm just going to stay up all night tonight. So of course, yeah, you're going to set yourself up to be extremely tired the next day because the way that your body works in terms of the needs it has is that it likes to operate on a sense of equilibrium, on a sense of balance. And so if you don't give your body enough fuel, if enough energy that it needs earlier on in the day, then your hunger is going to come back with a vengeance at the end of the day. And you're going to feel like the second that you start eating, then, oh my goodness, I'm so hungry, I can't stop. And even when you do stop, you want to continue eating. So that's one of the biggest mistakes that I see, is like saving up. And I was talking to Luke a few weeks ago as we were preparing to go to a wedding. And he was telling me how he used to skip meals and undereat before going to social events. And then he would just eat everything in sight, because you have this mentality of like, I want to be able to enjoy all of the food. But then he would end up overeating and feeling like crap. And it was not a pleasant experience. And these social events are meant to be pleasurable. And so that's the very first tip that I have for you. And have a pen and a piece of paper to write this down if you can. And it's to set your intention beforehand. Because when you are in the middle of a social event and you are surrounded by people and you're distracted and there's a lot going on, to try to then bring yourself back in and to have like intentional self-talk and being mindful, it's absolutely possible. But when you're new to doing this kind of work and new to mindfulness and being intentional and creating distance between you and your thoughts and your actions, it can be more difficult to do it when you're in the moment. So what can be really helpful is to do it, to set your intentions when there's not all of these people and all of this food around, and your nervous system is in this regulated and calm state. So an intention can look like, and this is something that I used to do all the time, is I would go into a social event and I would remind myself, okay, there's going to be a lot of food present. There's going to be a lot of options. There's going to be a lot of delicious options. And I want to be able to enjoy food. Absolutely. But another thing that I really want to be aware and present to is feeling good. Because I know that when I enjoy food, but I do it in a way that I just kind of try to get my hands on everything and I don't listen to my body, then the enjoyment of the food does not surpass, does not overpower how horrible I feel after overeating. And it's happened so many times to me where I would go to a restaurant and I would end up overeating just because that's what would be on my plate. And I would walk away and not even look back on it as a pleasurable or pleasant experience because I felt so sick. And if I had just stopped a few bites earlier, then I still would have enjoyed the heck out of my food, but I also would have been able to walk away and look back and see it as like, oh, that was a really great meal. That was really enjoyable, instead of, oh, I remember I just felt so sick afterwards because I ate so much. So setting your intentions beforehand, and your intentions, they're unique to you. So it could look like, I really want to focus on being present in the conversations with my friends and my family and being really there, not just physically, but mentally, instead of focusing on the food the entire time. The intentions could look like, I really want to be mindful of my body cues. So every time that I decide to go for another plate or another glass, right? Because that's when we can factor in alcohol as well. I really want to first tune into, what is my body telling me? Is it still hungry? Do I really want and need more food? Or is this just coming from a place of, I'm doing it because the food is there? So that's the first thing, is setting your intentions beforehand when you are clear, when you are detached from everything going on and you're not distracted. So the second tip that I have for you, it goes hand in hand with one of the mistakes that I was talking about, is don't save up your calories by skipping meals or snacks or eating smaller meals that are not enough to truly satisfy you. And I know that this can be a hard pattern to break when you're so used to restriction and you're so used to almost like planning out your binges and seeing social events as the only time that you can enjoy a certain food or these special occasions where you can really let yourself go. But what happens when you give so much importance to these social events and you see it as like a special occasion is that you feed into the restrict and binge cycle because you're setting yourself up to binge, right? When you undereat during the day, then you're likely to go to these social events extremely hungry. I remember I used to go to family things and I would get there and just like count down until they finally brought the food out because it had been so long since I had last eaten. And it's the only thing that you can think about. I'm sure that you've experienced this before where you go to a restaurant and maybe you didn't eat enough before going or you waited too long and you're there and you're trying to have a conversation with the person in front of you, but you cannot stop glancing over to see, okay, when is the waiter finally going to come to our table and take our order? And then when you finally do put in your order, you can't wait until your plate finally gets there. Every waiter that passes by your table with a plate of food, you hope that it's yours. And that's not because you're addicted to food. There's nothing wrong with you. It's literally just your body doing its job. Your body is sensing, okay, I am missing a very crucial need, which is fuel, energy, like one of the biggest things that your body needs to survive and to thrive. So what it's going to do, it's going to send messages to you to get you to satisfy that need. And one of those biggest messages is thoughts around food. Because you might notice, unless you do have some mental restriction involved, you might notice that when you're done eating, most of the time the thoughts about food dissipate, right? And again, we're not talking about mental restriction here where you might have the thoughts of, oh my God, I shouldn't have done that. I feel so bad. That's a whole different discussion. But if you get to a point where you are too hungry or you restricted yourself of carbs or certain key nutrients during the day, then you really are setting yourself up to overeat. And what happens then is that you do binge at this social event, and this reinforces this thought that you have that you can't control yourself around food. So then that gets deeper ingrained into your psyche, into your subconscious mind. And what does the chronic dieter do after a binge? Okay, well, I'm going to start again tomorrow. I'm going to go back to restricting tomorrow. So I hope that you're starting to see why saving up calories or trying to undereat before you go to an event where there's going to be food, it really just perpetuates this binge and restrict cycle. So when you can learn to just eat normally during the day, not change your eating habits, then you might notice that your eating habits at these social events will start to normalize. And over time, you're not going to have this out of control feeling. You're not going to feel like you're only going for those off-limit foods or this less nutritious foods. You might gravitate towards the salads and the fruits because this is no longer this like special occasion where you should only be eating the things that are typically off limit. So that takes me to my tip number 3, which is don't change the way that you eat during the day. So this kind of wraps into tip number 2. So we talked about don't save up your calories or skip your meals or your snacks, but don't change the way that you eat during the day. So what I mean by that is what I'll often see is like, okay, I'm just going to eat quote unquote clean or healthy, right? So it might be salads or whatever you deem as like good. And again, what this does is it might not be physical restriction in the sense that you might not be under eating or skipping meals, but it's still emotional restriction because you're reinforcing that all or nothing mentality. So during the day, I'm going to be good so that at night I can be bad. I can eat whatever I want. I can feel like I deserved it because I ate so good during the day. And again, the reason why this can be really harmful is because then you'll be there. You're only going to go for the chips and the brownies and the things that you don't typically allow yourself to have that your mind probably sees as bad. And you're probably going to feel this chaotic experience around food, this unpleasant experience around food. You might overeat, you might feel lethargic afterwards, feel uncomfortable, feel bloated. And this is going to perpetuate this belief that, oh, well, whenever I'm around social events, then I just lose control and I completely fall off the wagon and I'm off the rails. And the reason why that's happening is because of the behaviors that you're having beforehand. One thing that I always explain to my clients is most of the time when it comes to like late night or night binge eating and overeating, it's not usually a night problem. It's usually a day problem. And the thoughts and beliefs and behaviors that happen before the actual event happens. So now we're moving on to tip number 4, which is to tune into your hunger level before you start eating, while you're eating, before you go for the next plate. So what I mean by that, and I'm going to use a specific example of a wedding that I went to 2 weeks ago. So it was my cousin's wedding, absolutely beautiful. So let me walk you through what that looks like for me. So first of all, if I know that the ceremony is at 3 p.m. and the cocktail hour is at 5 p.m., for example, then I am first going to make sure that I eat enough so that I am satisfied and full until 5 p.m. because I'm not going to have my last meal at 12 p.m. or even 1 p.m. because that's 4 hours without eating. And I know my body. I know that that is not going to work for me. So the first thing, if you can, and this is not always possible, but if you can, is get an idea of like what the schedule is going to be like. So is food going to be taken out at 6 p.m. or 9 p.m. so that you can coordinate your own eating beforehand. So you get to the cocktail hour, and I know that cocktail hour is usually, they come up to you with these platters of food, and I know that this is going to last about an hour. And the next meal that I eat, the first course, might be around 7 p.m. So again, I want to tune into, all right, well, I need to eat enough so that it lasts me until 7 p.m. But I also don't want to eat too much to a point that by the time the first course comes in, I am too full. But because it's a wedding and it's, the main meal, I still want to eat the food. So when people come around with their platters of food, the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to tap into, okay, what are all the different options? So what are they coming up to me with? And what sounds the best to me? And this can be done when you're looking at a barbecue spread where they have a table with all these different options. They'll have pasta salads and cold pizzas and platters of different things. So looking at all the different options and first asking yourself, what sounds the best to me? What do I really want to try? And also, how hungry am I right now? So one of the tools that I share inside Food Freedom Academy is the hunger scale. And I'll also leave the link in the show notes for you if you'd like to get your hands on this hunger scale as well. This is one of my favorite tools to help you get acquainted with the sensations in your body. So I'm going to tune into where am I on the hunger scale? Am I like a 1 where I am absolutely starving? Am I a 3? Am I a 4? And then I can make my decisions based off of that. So let's say I'm like at a 3 or a 4, I'm comfortably hungry, but I'm not ravenous. So I'm going to start by having the things that sound the best to me. And then if I want to go for seconds of those foods, or if I want to try maybe the things that didn't sound as good, but maybe some people are saying, it was absolutely amazing, so I want to give it a try. So that's going to be kind of what I do when there's a spread, where there's a buffet, where there's a lot of options. And then I know that I've got a few different courses at a wedding. So I'm also going to be mindful that there's going to be a lot of food throughout the night. And I remember my sister's wedding, which was, I want to say 2016, but I hope she's not listening to this because that date might be wrong. But I remember my sister's wedding, I was still deeply struggling with disordered eating. And I remember I was also a bridesmaid. And I remember by the end of the night, I had eaten so much. I was so uncomfortable in my bridesmaid dress because those things are tight. And it just I remember the rest of the night just being super uncomfortable, super self-conscious, just wanting to sit down and lie in bed, which was not an option. And it takes away from the night. It takes away from a beautiful, enjoyable moment. And I'm not here saying it wasn't an amazing night, because it really was. It was one of probably my top 5 nights in my years of living, but it still was something that I wish back then I had been more mindful and connected to my body. But of course, I was going through a lot at the time. But knowing that there is going to be a lot of food available, and no matter how much I wish my stomach could handle, there is probably going to be some things that I just won't have space in my stomach to eat. There's going to be so many different options. And so this is why it comes back to deciding, okay, what do I really want to try? And if there are some things, let's say it's the end of the night and there's a late night buffet, and it's a McDonald's bar, for example. Well, I can then decide between, do I really value having this McDonald's or this pizza and probably feeling not great physically for the rest of the night? Or do I more value feeling good, feeling energetic, and having a really positive memory of this? And again, and this is obviously a different conversation, but when you have healed your Last Supper mentality, which means when you no longer see this as the last time that you can eat McDonald's or the last time that you can eat this special food, then there is no longer this urgency, this scarcity mindset that even if it doesn't sound that good, or even if I'm not hungry, I should eat it now because who knows when I'm going to have it again. So that's my tip number 4, which is tune into your hunger level. And then I just realized that I already gave you my tip number 5 when I was talking about tip number 4, which is to start with what sounds the best, right? So start with and this, if we're talking about, let's say a buffet situation, you grab your plate, you take a look at all the different options, start with those things that are your number ones that sound the best. Put a little bit on your plate of all of those different things so that you can taste it. Because sometimes you put something on your plate, you think it's going to be amazing, it doesn't sound great. And if you're still working through your clean your plate mentality, then it might be a little bit more difficult for you to just leave that food on your plate. And of course, this is something that I'm constantly teaching my clients is how do we rewire that clean your plate mentality if you grew up having that hammered into your subconscious mind, but starting with what sounds the best. And I promised you a 6th bonus tip. So the last thing that I will say is if you do overeat, if it does end up being a unpleasant eating experience or you binge, please, please, please be aware if you start beating yourself up. and thinking, oh my God, I did it again. I'm such a failure. Be aware of it, number one, and don't allow yourself to give those old thought patterns your energy. Because the more you give something energy, the more it grows and the deeper it gets ingrained into your psyche. And when you're so good at repeating the same patterns over and over again, then they will happen automatically. Like, you don't have to think about being negative to yourself. It is done. It is on autopilot. So if you notice, okay, I overate, this doesn't feel great, instead of beating yourself up and giving attention and energy to the negative self-talk, this is going to be tough for you, but see this as an opportunity to learn. What I always explain, like the very first week when I start working with my clients, I talk about how in life and in your journey towards food freedom, every challenge is an opportunity to learn. Success is a crappy teacher because most people don't know what led to their success. However, when you have a quote unquote failure, or you have a challenge or a problem or a struggle, it gets you to pay attention. So when you can look at it as an opportunity to learn and get curious, like really see it as, even if you can see it as exciting. Okay, so there's something here for me to learn. What can I learn about this? Maybe I didn't eat enough during the day, and that's why I felt that way. Maybe I was really distracted. Maybe I was using food as a way to cope with a lot of emotional stuff that was going on internally. I know that my family triggers me. I know that when I'm around them, I tend to just want to numb and distract all the uncomfortable things that are going on inside. The first step is always awareness. So when you can bring awareness and attention to what can I learn about this, then you can start putting things in place, strategies, so that next time you can mitigate that. Next time, it can be a more pleasurable experience, and you might not be perfect. Chances are you won't be perfect, but at least you're going to learn something from this, and you're going to gather data and information about ways to make your eating experiences more enjoyable. And in the end, enjoy social events without fear, without anxiety, and without constant fear that you're going to lose control. So let me just recap for you those 5+1 tips. Number one is to set your intention beforehand. Set your intentions about how you want to feel, what you want to experience, what's important to you. Number two is don't save up your calories by skipping meals or snacks. Number three is don't change the way that you eat during the day. If you typically eat kind of the same type of things, or you have like regular patterns, don't change it up. Just keep those patterns going. Number four, tune into your hunger before you eat and get a sense of what the food situation is going to be like, how long you're going to have to wait before the next opportunity to eat. And every time that you go for a second plate, all right, where am I at? Am I just going for a second plate because it's there, or am I truly hungry? Number five, start with what sounds the best. And bonus tip, if you do overeat, see it as an opportunity to learn. Journal on it. Like, I cannot stress this enough. Journal on this and ask yourself the really empowering question of, what can I learn from this? And those are your 5+1 ways to enjoy social events this summer, but also at any time of the year. Like, I'm doing this episode around the summer because I know there's a lot going on for all of you, but this is applicable to holidays and birthdays and going out to eat and yada, yada, yada. So thank you so much for listening. I appreciate you. I hope you got a lot of value out of this. If you did, send me a DM on Instagram at Sabrina Manuel Health. Let me know what was the most valuable for you. And if you want to learn more about how you can work with us inside Food Freedom Academy, go into the show notes. You will find the waitlist page where you can hop on the waitlist to be the first notified when we open the doors to my signature group coaching program, Food Freedom Academy, where I teach women how to heal their relationship with food and their bodies, become intuitive eaters, so that you can finally find freedom from overeating, binge eating, food obsession, and focus on things that matter most to you. I love you. Thank you so much for being here, and I'll see you on the next episode. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode. If you found it valuable, I would love if you would share it with someone you know that could benefit. If you're loving the show, don't forget to subscribe over on Apple Podcasts so you don't miss a single episode. I really love hearing feedback from you, so please leave a rating and review over on Apple to help us get in the ears of more people who need it the most. Finally, come hang out with me on Instagram at Sabrina Magnan Health for more educational content and get up close and personal with me. Thank you so much for being here, and I'll see you on the next episode.